whole week are going to be working on a project, the taxonomy evolution big project. Now, I didn't get to do as many activities with evolution as I normally do, and that's just simply that it is COVID year and we're running a little bit behind schedule, and I wanted to make sure that we did get to our ecology unit before the end of the year. So I kind of cut some things down a bit. But if we look at this, I'm just going to read the first part here. It says, in the year 2525, humans, after hundreds of years of constant effort, have successfully polluted all bodies of water on Earth. As a result, almost all previously known species of plant, animal, and other life have become extinct. Through natural selection, genetic engineering, and selective breeding programs, a portion of the Earth has been successfully repopulated. The following organisms are all that remain. Now, there's 14 of them, but before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the genetic engineering. Oh, there we go. Genetic engineering and selective breeding, because those are two of the things that I cut out this year. So like genetic engineering would be when we go in and we change the genetics of something. We see that a lot of times in the foods we eat. Right? We have to go in there and genetically engineer them some so that we can make mass quantities of them in order to have enough food. The selective breeding thing is when we pick and choose who's going to breed. Now, obviously, this doesn't happen a lot with like humans, if at all. Not in the United States anyway, but we see this a lot with like livestock, dogs. Even when I got my puppy, the lady asked me if I was going to ever breed him, and I said, no, we don't plan on it. It's just a family pet. And she was like, okay, well then you can pick from these, because the others had the desirable markings to be good stud dogs. So, I mean, that would be selective breeding, picking and choosing like, oh, we like these traits. So anyways, now we've got 14 animals here then that have repopulated the Earth. And you can see that it'll tell you what they are, and then it may give you a little bit of information, usually about what they eat, which will help you out in the long run. So I'll come back to these guys in a second. I'm just going to show you, it says your assignment, what you're going to be doing. So number 1 says you're going to illustrate, that's draw and color your interpretation of each organism's appearance. So for instance, and it doesn't have to be a full page, I've had kids use like one paper per organism, but what I've seen most in the past is that they will cut their paper in half and put an organism on like the top half, and an organism on the second half. So for instance, the sun-basking shark, it says to color. Make sure if it tells you a color that you're coloring it that. So like on your shark, their fins, make sure you color them green. I've also had kids out to the side write like autotroph so that they can have those characteristics right there on the paper. It might help you towards the end. Now, I'm not grading you on your artistic ability because I have 0 artistic ability, so don't worry about that. Just do the best you can. But I always do like to get a little bit of this in here because I know some kids like to do that. All right, so then the second part of this says write the number and the name from 2B next to the drawing. So let's go down to number 2 and see exactly what we're going to be writing there. All right, so number 2 says, as an alien taxonomist, it is your responsibility to classify these existing organism types. So A, you're going to create a taxonomic scheme using only kingdom, phylum, genus, and species. So we know that we have King Philip came over for great spaghetti. But we're saying since there is only 14 organisms, we're only going to do a kingdom and a phylum. And then, of course, we have to have genus, species so that we can give them names, right? Because all the names we've seen are always genus, species, like Homo sapiens is genus, species name. The intermediate categories have been eliminated since there's only 14 basically. So we have, I recommend 2 kingdoms, like, oh, I'm going to split these things into 2. Like if you think about it right now, we only have animals, plants, fungus, protists, and our bacterias. So there's only 6 kingdoms to begin with, and we have a ton of organisms on this earth. So with only 14, I would say 2, but if you want to make more than 2, have at it. Use the numbers of each organism to identify where they are placed on your chart. So like number 1 is your sun-basking shark. All right, now B is what I just talked about in number 1. It says create Latin sounding names for each organism. Remember, these will be scientific names and will include a genus and species classification written in this form. All right, so remember, maybe things that you think are more closely related, they could have the same genus name, okay? So for instance, maybe you're like, oh, I've got two fish. I've got a shark and I have a goldfish. So I'm going to put them in genus Aquaticus. I'm just making up names here. You guys can make up names too. Aquaticus, and then my shark maybe is Aquaticus sharkus and Aquaticus fishius for my goldfish. All right, so I have given them a species, a genus species name. They're in the same genus though, they're both Aquaticus. So that's just, it's completely up to you. I'm just completely making up random names. Maybe you want to use Aquaticus as your kingdom, I don't know, or your phylum. Okay, so how I do this a lot and how I tell kids to do this, part A, sometimes it's easier to just kind of draw something out. So, for instance, I'm going to have, okay, I have all my animals. I guess not even animals, there's some plants in there. I'm going to write organisms. I have all my organisms. And then I'm kind of going to do a backwards tree. I'm going to say, okay, maybe I have these two types. Maybe I want to do land versus ocean, or maybe I want to do plant versus animal, whatever you want to come up with, or maybe you want a third category. And then once you get those, this would be your kingdom. I'm running out of room. This right here would be your kingdom. And then you would split your kingdom up. So whatever was right here, you would split it up into phylums. Okay, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but if you're having any issues, just let me know. But that might be the easiest way to do that. Okay, so remember when you're making the names that you're writing them correctly. That is part of the grading rubric, that it is a capital on your genus name, a lowercase on your species name, and that it is underlined. All right, so there's going to be that. So that's basically your drawing, your coloring, and you're giving them names. And then you're making, of course, that little chart showing your kingdom, phylum, all that. Number 3, you're going to prepare a dichotomous key for these organisms. So remember, you should end with 13A, 13B, since there's 14 organisms. You should have 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, all the way to 13A, 13B. So you're going to prepare that dichotomous key, which remember is always separating into two groups. Remember, the dichotomous key is based on appearance of the organisms. Use your drawings to make the key. So once again, using colors sometimes helps with that. Number 4, construct a cladogram for the organisms. Remember, in the past we have used a chart to help us out with this. Remember, a branch that comes off the main line can fork. So what I mean is that when you're doing a cladogram, it's like, what do they all have? What they all have in common will go right there. All right, and so then you can have a branch, but remember, the branch can fork. I mean, the branch can do that if you wanted to. And then you have a new characteristic here. You could put a characteristic here that just goes to that organism right there. All right, so that's what I'm talking about. It's your cladogram. It does not have to be one nice, neat line that has singular lines coming off of it. It's up to you, kind of how you think they're all related. And if you look at the true tree of life, as they call it, we have like 3 branches that come off that tree, and then there's just a whole bunch of little branches everywhere. But it's all based on you. As long as it makes sense and you put effort into it, you're going to be fine. And then the last one is answer the questions related to the project found on a separate sheet of paper. All right, so explain how evolution through natural selection has occurred in this scenario. Basically adaptations. So we've done some stuff with how have these things adapted? What has helped them adapt? What has helped them surviving in their current situation? Name 2 organisms that have adapted to this new land. So here it's just kind of like explain how natural selection has occurred. And number 2 is then telling us, like, hey, pick 2 of the organisms and tell us exactly how those 2 have. So the shark still has identical skeleton to previous sharks. What other way can you prove evolution? Think back to that evolution packet. The evolution packet is going to help you out with that. There's 5 evidences of evolution. That's going to help you out. Why did you choose the 2 kingdoms? That's really up to you. Why did you do what you did? Genetic engineering, I kind of discussed at the beginning of this, so that can help you out here on 5 and 6. Number 7, I talked about selective breeding. Number 8, what do you think? This is a what do you think. There's no right or wrong answer as long as you've explained. What's this one? What are the least complex organisms based on your cladogram? What practice would let us know for sure who is the most complex? Once again, it says think back to your previous working class. Think back to that evidence of evolution packet. And then number 10, how does DNA play a role in this project and how organisms have adapted? Think back. We did not do the pocket mouse, but maybe think back to your evidence of evolution packet because we do look at DNA in that. All right, so here is the grading rubric that I will use. First off, did you draw them? So you get points for drawing them. Is the name correct? Do you have a genus and a species name? Is it underlined? Is the genus capitalized? Is the species lowercase? Okay, I'm going to give you points for doing that on every single one. Kingdom. Did you do a kingdom and phylum? Are each one of these in a kingdom and phylum? And then did you put them, does the genus species, like, are those correct? Like, you didn't put the basking shark and the goldfish in the same species because that's not, you can't do that. They're not the same species. So I'm just making sure that that all looks okay. So that's 56 points for the drawing the names. Then I'm going to look at your dichotomous key and I'm going to go through and make sure, I'm going to pick random ones out, make sure that the key makes sense. And then your cladogram and chart, I'm going to make sure that it looks okay. Once again, that's kind of more like, what do you think? So I'm going to make sure that it looks okay. And then the questions are 15 points. It says turn this paper in with the project, so obviously just turn it back in on Google Classroom. You're going to get those 8 points. It's more for the kids that are here so they don't lose this. And then there's a log of participation. So effort, participation grade. It's a total of 154 points altogether. Here's the log. This is more because the kids are going to be working within their tables and they're going to tell me the date and what they did. That kind of takes away like, oh, somebody did all the work and somebody didn't do any work. So that's what that is for. Obviously, you're at home doing this on your own, so don't worry too much about that. But it might be a good way to kind of keep you on track, like, hey, I'm going to do number 1 today. I'm going to do number 2 tomorrow. So anyways, just if you have any questions, let me know. This is always a lot of work, and especially when you're at home and I'm not there to help out or be right there for questions to be asked. So let me know if you need anything at all. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.